Good evening, everybody. A very big welcome here to this event this evening. We're delighted to see you all here. I'm Nicola Pogson. I'm Director of Alumni Relations, and it's just such a pleasure to see you all here this evening. It's hard to believe that it was only 18 months ago, barely, that we had our first online meeting to get this group, the Black Alumni Network group, together. It was an international event, and online, of course, because we were just coming out of the pandemic. And since then, they've organized 2 socials very successfully, and this is their first in-person event, and they've set the bar really high because, well, you know, they're high achievers. So it's really a great group to work with, and we're delighted to be working with them on this. I think I just want to say that, really, and we're very honored to have Eric and Michelle with us here this evening. We're delighted that they're both going to share their time with us. So a little bit about housekeeping before I hand over to Ten and Ansu. No fire alarms or drills are expected, but there is an exit there, and there's one round the corner at the back, so just follow us if something like that happens. And do be aware that there is recording taking place, so that when you ask a question, or if at the end, just use the mic. Your faces won't be recorded, but be mindful that your questions are being recorded. And I'm going to hand over now, and I just want to remind everybody that we've now launched this year's Alumni Awards. So keep a lookout in your newsletters and everything. If you know of an alumnus, even if you're not an alumnus, that you want to nominate, go through the process, because we really want to have yet another round of fantastic award winners. So over to you two.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Good evening. Thank you very much, Nicola. It's really a pleasure to be here and to see everyone seated here, our special guests for the evening. It's been quite the journey getting here. It's good to be back in Imperial. There's a saying, home is where, it's an interesting saying, home is where the Wi-Fi connects automatically. And I walked in here and my Wi-Fi was connected, and I said, yeah, it's good to be back. So I believe the room is filled with a lot of alumni, and I'm sure you're really glad to be back here and taking the atmosphere. If you didn't have the privilege of attending Imperial College, well, you missed out. It's not too late. The school offers executive programs, and so that's just a plug in there. But by all means, it's really a pleasure having everyone out here this evening. This didn't exist 18 months ago. It exists now, and it's been a wonderful journey so far, and there's still so much ground to cover. I really just want to leave us with one thought, and it is that 18 months ago, when we first proposed having the Imperial Black Alumni Network, we were overwhelmingly surprised at how much support we got, and the institution rallied to ensure that everything was put in place to make sure that everyone in the Imperial community and the alumni felt like they had a place within the institution. And there's so much that has been done, and so much that goes on behind the scenes, and still so much to do. But most importantly, when I reflect on how things got started and how that journey has evolved, I remember a very interesting quote, how it is that something that doesn't exist at some point starts off at another point, and then it begins to grow and take on a life of its own. But who gets it started? And it takes someone to have courage. It takes someone to say, let's get this done. And that takes on a life of its own. And that someone isn't a third party, it's you. So you are the one that you've been waiting for. And that's the quote I want to leave you with. Thank you very much. And at this moment, I will hand over to my senior brother, my mentor, my colleague on the committee, and my fellow African who has tried to get involved in the Jollof Wars, but Sierra Leone doesn't cut it. It's between Nigeria and Ghana. I'm sorry, I just had to put that out there. Over to you, Ansu.
So there's two things on his thank you very much, Teniola. There's two things. Number one, I can't believe that he managed to bring the Jollof Raws into this introduction. Number two, he has this habit of when he messages me, calling me uncle, making me feel very old, and I'm very proud that he didn't do that. And I shall catch up with you after about your words. I wanted to say just a few points. It's a great opportunity for us to be together and to come together, and there's not that many spaces. So it's amazing that Imperial is helping us to create this space, and really, again, as Tenor said, hats off to Imperial, to the alumni team who have been stellar in organizing this. So please, a round of applause for the alumni team. Thank you, Nicola. Thank you, Kellyanne. Thank you, Carly and team. Can you still hear me? Yeah. When we started this event, as Nicola said, we've never done anything like this before, right? We've had some socials, been to the bar, had some drinks, and then we said, you know what, we're going to raise the bar. We're going to start doing some amazing events. We knew that our first speaker would be it will be a statement of intent. You know, the first person that we chose, it had to be someone of caliber, somebody who had vision, shared the vision, and was inspiring to listen to. It had to be someone who encapsulated and personified a couple of things: a get-up-and-go attitude, accomplishment, so overcoming hurdles, and again, someone that was inspirational. But perhaps the most important thing is that this person should have a heart for the Black community and actually want to move the needle and move the community forwards. It's amazing when we look at Eric, and this is how this came to be when I approached Eric out of the blue. I don't know him, he doesn't know me, I don't know people that know him that I kind of went through. It was a direct, cold approach, and his response was, this sounds interesting, we might be able to make this work. Here's my PR company, go and speak to them. And here we are. So a round of applause for that, please, for Eric. Right. The second thing that tells you about the heart of this man is he's just come off a flight from the US. So, you know, he is tired. Now, let's be very clear. If you ever invite me, if I ever get to a place where you get to invite me to events and I've had to fly for 10 hours, and you're like, no, I'm not coming. I just want to make that very clear. I love you all. I love the Black community. I'm not coming. But enough about Eric, because we're actually going to get someone else to tell you more about Eric, and he's a man really who needs no introduction. But we had to find someone. We then had a search when we had Eric say yes. We had to then find who could hang with this person, who has enough tenacity, enough drive, enough fire, has a background and a track record, and can empathize with what he's talking about, that could sit here and not be intimidated speaking to this man. Now, the person that we found is Michelle Palmer. So please, a round of applause for Michelle. Dr. Michelle Palmer, I may add, and really when I looked at her track record and her academic record, and I am going to finish in 2 minutes, I saw that she studied, I think, organic chemistry. And for those of us who studied economics or business, whenever you see, PhD and you start seeing the sciences, you immediately think, okay, this person's smarter than me. I just need to pretend that I can have a conversation and stay with them. So she has a PhD in the sciences. She went on to work at some prestigious institutions such as P&G, Capgemini. She was a consultant, and then she decided to create her own thing. So she'll tell you a bit about her story and create her own company, TheDifferenceEngine, which she's been doing for a very long time since. And again, moving the needle. Michelle is also known for speaking on D&I issues around the globe in multiple different circumstances. So I'm glad that we're here. I'm excited. I'm excited to have both Eric here speaking to us and Michelle speaking as well and interviewing him. And I hope you all enjoy. So on behalf of the entire committee, who I have not, do we have a clicker? I'm going to put thank you. I'm going to put, we represent a committee of 6 of us, and we're not all here. Only 10 and I are here. But please be aware this is all of us. So on behalf of all of us, thank you for coming. Please continue to dial in, be connected to the alumni network and be involved. Please, a round of applause for both Eric and for Michelle.
Okay, so here we go.
Here we are.
Thank you for the kind introductions. So let me start by introducing to you Eric D. Collins, who is an American businessman, a serial entrepreneur, a technology expert, former President Obama appointee. He is also the CEO and the co-founder of Impact X Capital Partners. In 2021, you may have seen this yourself on TV, he was announced as the host of Channel 4 business reality show, The Moneymaker. He has served on President Obama's Small Business Administration's Council on Underserved Communities. Originally from Alabama, his late father was a university professor and then a Swiss chemical company executive. And his mother was a music educator and guidance counselor. Now we have some competition in the room, people. You're all very smart, most of you from Imperial. Collins hails from Princeton University and Harvard Law School, where he attended alongside Barack Obama. So we are now connected to Barack Obama through Eric Collins. Just 1 degree of separation from the ex-president of the US. In 2018, Eric was part of a group of influential Black European and US serial entrepreneurs, institutional investors, investment bankers, corporate leaders and entertainers, which led to the founding of Impact X Capital Partners. Eric was named one of the UK's top 100 BAME leaders in technology by the FT. He was voted one of the most influential Black people in Britain, featuring on the Power List in 2020. And his first book, We Don't Need Permission, Unlocking Black Empowerment for Good, was published in April 2022. The Times newspaper say he's one of the most powerful business people in Britain. So let's have a big round of applause for Eric Collins.
It's a bit embarrassing. That whole thing, it's very embarrassing, but okay, I
You'll
get
see
it.
he's also very cool, very calm, very collected, very bright. So, Eric, you started stellar academic career, Harvard, Princeton. Today you're sat here in front of all of us at Imperial College. Putting my executive headhunter hat on, I need you to fill in the gaps for me, please. From academia to where we are today. Tell us a little bit more about your varied career.
Well, thank you very much. That's an interesting question. We hadn't practiced this, so now I've got to come up with a short way of explaining this. May I say one thing first? May I thank you for sort of helping to bring out what I think is going to be hopefully some insightful comments that will be helpful to this group, and then also to the group that organized. It is not a small undertaking to get your colleagues, your peers, and your friends to actually show up on is it Tuesday? On a Tuesday evening, when it was, on some of these pretty summer days. And so to be able to do that, thank you very much for taking the time. I think it's always important that we convene, and that the convening not just be for the sake of entertainment, but for the sake of actually instigating some behavior. So let me assure you right now, I'm going to give you a big caveat. By the end of today, I would like us to be working on a project together. All right? So let's see what we can do. But I will focus on the sort of the important conversation of today. That, I come from a family of people who have found that I'm an investor now, but one of the best things and one of the best investments that we make is in ourselves. And that is the investment in experiences, sometimes through education, sometimes through practical activity. And that is the thing which then allows us, often not just through the academic work and sort of what we're doing in the classroom, but then the other sorts of things, to be able to have a good basis in a compounding, and that's what we like from investing, right? The ability to have compounding growth. I would say that your introduction actually emphasizes some of that. The kind of education that I had, it's not so much the education, it's the people with whom I was educated. Those individuals have continued to be the basis of my funding. So they're whenever I do a project, they're often the first money that comes in the door. They are the individuals who have the expertise, who then are often the experts that I then turn to in order to be able to get things done and to accelerate and get through potential problems. And they're also the people who help to amplify. So they help to, accelerate and amplify whatever it is that we're doing, because they have their own ambitions, and whatever they can do actually speaks and echoes what we're doing and can often amplify to heights we never actually anticipated. Such is the case, not just with Barack Obama, but I went to school with Michelle Obama. So she was at Princeton when I was at Princeton. So, I've known Michelle, my 35th reunion from university was a few weekends ago. And so I've known her for 35 years. And then I've known Barack for the amount of time that I was in law school, so a few less years than that. And it's not as though I speak to them ever. I'm not sure that they ever say the name Eric Collins in any sort of environment in which they actually exist, and other than to say he probably owes them money. But when I think about the other people, they were not sort of exceptions to the rule. And one of the things that I would say about Imperial and seeing the people who are here indicates that the same thing exists. These were not the only people of ambition. They were not the only people of substance. They were not the only people of brilliance who were Black at the institutions that I attended. And for me, it has been extremely important to have that network. And that has been the network that has always been the first movers in my life. And if I did not have that network of Black, empowered, interested, and engaged people, I don't know that I would have been able to accomplish, particularly Impact X and the work that we're doing. I'm not sure that I would have been able to accomplish the types of things we've been able to accomplish, because you need that early investment. So I would just say, in the simple answer to your question, so what happened from there to here? I had that education as an early investment, and I continued to leverage what was one of the most important pieces, and that was the network that I came from it, and that has produced everything else.
Fabulous, thanks for that. In my own business, I spent many years working with what I could describe as being quite traditional VC funds. Mm-hmm. So you're talking about Impact X there. Mm-hmm. So, I've been privileged enough to work with Goldman Sachs on their equity growth fund. Mm-hmm. Lakestar, another example. Mm-hmm. And, we've been able to find them really great people that's been able to help those portfolio companies that they invest in to scale and to grow.
Correct.
And diversity is important to them. Mm-hmm. What I found is that when we're working with founders and CEOs that are diverse from those companies, you talk about amplifying, that drive for diversity is louder with diverse founders. We don't work with many of them, but when we do, it's a very refreshing and a very marked difference. We had a Zoom session during COVID, mm-hmm. and that was the first time that I met you. And on that Zoom session, we were talking about scaling up and exiting businesses with VC funding. On that Zoom session, I was struck by your fund. There were Ada Ventures also was on that call, 10 by 10, cornerstone partners, all focused on investing in diverse founders. That was your raison d'etre, very different. Can you tell the audience a little bit more about Impact X Capital? What drove you to start it? And please also don't be shy to talk about your successes. And I'm thinking notably mm-hmm. of the superstars that are Marshmallow.
Yeah. So Impact X is a venture capital fund in the traditional sense. That means that we are out there looking for organizations that are relatively early stage, fast growth oriented, and that we believe can actually return about 10x what we put into them within between 24 months and 48 months. That's kind of the business model that's associated with venture capital. The first thing in terms of creating Impact X was to create a thesis. What's the thesis? What are you investing? So we were investing in a market inefficiency. For us, diversity and inclusion is a market inefficiency. It means that there is we under-index for investing in women and people of color in the UK and in Europe. If you look at the absolute pounds and pence, and generally people measure these, even though we're in Europe and the UK, in dollars. If you look at the absolute number of dollars that have been invested in the UK as a subset of Europe in the last 10 years, there have been tens and tens of billions of pounds or dollars that have been invested. When you look at how much of that has gone to women and to people of color, women and men of color, you'll find, we did a study, we actually worked with an organization called Extend Ventures, and Extend Ventures went back and looked at data over 10 years and found that less than 2% of all venture capital in the UK, as an isolated example of Europe, went to women, all women teams. And less than 0.24% went to black teams, and 0.002% went to black women. Those are terrible numbers, or it's an opportunity if you're a venture capitalist. Because unless somehow we believe that black people and women cannot come up with the great ideas, and we don't believe they have the ambition to grow very, very big organizations, the indication that there's not sufficient capital to support their aspirations is a signal, and should be a very powerful signal to the market, that inefficiency means that we should be exploring it and saying that we should actually dig and dig and dig and say, why does that exist, and what could we actually get as a significant upside based on that inefficiency? That was the premise upon which ImpactX started. It didn't start as the idea that what we want to do is that we want to invest just in diverse entrepreneurs. We believe that we can get a great return, and that has been proven over time. We really invest in Europe and the UK. We invest in digital and technology as a category, health, education, well-being as a category, and media and entertainment. Those are areas where across Europe, women and people of color over-index in terms of their participation. And that's important because you need a very deep pool of talent, right? You can't just find 3 businesses, you've got to find 100 businesses a month. Not 100 businesses a year, 100 businesses a month that you can look at and you can determine, are they ones that satisfy your criteria? Do they have the growth dynamics? Is the team the one you're going to look at? All of those things have to all work out. And does it actually fit your core criteria? And do they actually have enough sort of traction to let you know, or to signal effectively, what the future should look like for this organization? So we are looking at hundreds of organizations. In fact, over the time that we've been in business, we have more than 3,000 organizations that we've looked at. And of the 3,000 organizations, we have only invested in less than 1% of those. And when you look at the totality says that there is about $3 billion of unmet capital demand among those organizations today. And we believe we've only scratched the surface in terms of black-led and women-led organizations in Europe, in the UK. We have found a great deal. It's not just that this is a theory, though, and it's not just that this is throwaway money. We are very much in the business of 2 things: returning ROI, so return on investment, being at venture scale, so 10x or plus for the investments that we make, plus it's job creation. And we're very specific at the job creation we're looking for. We're looking for job creation that is satisfied by people of color and women. We look at the founder team, we look at the C-suite, we look at the board, we look at P&L responsible roles, and we look at the engineering organization. So our intention is that as we build large-scale organizations that return capital to investors, we are also building a pipeline of great talent, and that great talent exists and can actually stay in the organization that they're in and develop their careers. They can go to another organization and colonize those organizations, or they can start their own organizations. And in time, that releases capital. And that capital will not only be used to pay off student loans and buy a house and do some philanthropic things, but will also, some of that goes as risk capital into other organizations. So there's a flywheel effect. So whatever we are doing then has the impact of being a flywheel. And a good example of that is a company that you mentioned. Do any of you know Marshmallow, the insurtech company? If you don't know Marshmallow, I assume you haven't been reading the Financial Times, because Marshmallow was named the 2nd fastest growing company in Europe 3 months ago. And that is a black company. Let me be very clear. That is a black company that was started by 2 black British identical twins. They are Alexander and Oliver Kent Brahim. They're right here in the UK. They're right here in London. That's where they grew up. They started a company that when we invested, and the company is actually targeting expats who come to the UK and find that as they're trying to get insurance, their insurance costs are often 5 times someone who's local, because of the inability to associate their driving record to their application for insurance. So what they do is they use a bit of artificial intelligence and they rake the internet. They find ways of actually inferring as well as finding driving records that then can be used by the like Go Compare and other sorts of sites in order to find the best rates. And of course, if this is your job to get your child to school on time and you need to drive, if it's your job to run a family, if it's your job to maybe even be an Uber driver, those things are absolutely imperative. And by having them, and the expensive cost of actually participating could keep you out of that space. In any case, when we got into the company was doing about, I don't even remember how much revenue they do, but I do remember, they had a £30 million valuation, which for a black company in the UK is huge. 18 months later, they were 1.2 billion. Okay, let's go back over that, right? We started off and they were 30 million. And then 18 months later, we have a 28.8x return on our investment because they are now in unicorn status. I talk to people all the time. People constantly are talking to me about real estate, and I'm constantly saying, why do you waste your time? I'm being a little bit facetious, but I am saying that if what you think that you're doing is building wealth by putting money into real estate, I have to beg to differ a little bit. First of all, in the UK, do you know that only 30% of black families own their own home? And that is, so please let's not make the distinction between among African Americans, Caribbean Brits, and African Brits. On average, it's 30%. That's how many people own their homes. So 70% of us don't own our own homes, meaning we don't have a lot of equity. Do you know that 1 in 2 black British children live below the poverty line? And that was in 2018. And we've allowed that to happen. It's now 2023. The COVID crisis, the crisis of cost of living, the inflationary crisis are all things which have exacerbated that number. Now we know that more than 50%, more than half of black children here in the UK, our children, are living below the poverty line. All right? So that is a given. We also know that if indeed you are here in the UK and you're thinking about questions of wealth, if you have a black business, the median turnover, so 50% below this number and 50% above, is only 25,000 pounds of turnover a year. So most of our black businesses are these hustles. They're not like Marshmallow, right? They can't even support an entrepreneur with a livable wage in the UK. Think about that. Over half the companies could not even support a livable wage because you have to look at costs and the like. No business, that's not profit, that's just turnover. Right? And so there are all sorts of costs that are associated. So this is what we're dealing with here in the UK. And suddenly you have a Marshmallow. So Marshmallow is the second black unicorn in Europe, and they both happen to be here in the UK. WorldRenet was the first one. That organization has continued to grow. Year on year, they've doubled in size, and year on year, they have been able to maintain 50% women and 20% people of color in key positions. That's the kind of organization that ImpactX believes changes the world. And let's be clear, our perception is that we are a social justice organization. That if we had a black woman from Birmingham who built an organization of the scale of Amazon, which we believe is absolutely possible, we don't think of that as being sort of outside the bounds of what should happen. We believe that there is a black woman from Bristol who can build the next Tesla. We certainly believe that. And so because we believe it, we keep on doubling down in terms of investing in women and people of color, because we know that out of this is going to become something sensational. And the reason it's important, in 2021, I'm sorry, I'm so long. This will end. I promise you it will all end. It will end. In 2021, if you look at Amazon had worldwide 1.5 million employees. If you think about Amazon on a daily basis, Amazon probably employs hundreds, if not thousands, of lawyers, not as employees, but from law firms, and also accountants, right? Everyone works for them. KPMG works for them. Deloitte works for them. Everyone works for them. All the law firms, Freshfield, everyone works for them. All of these organizations that say inherently, Goldman Sachs works for them, would love to work for them every day, right, and do a lot of billing to this organization. All those organizations say, when you talk to them about hiring black people, it's like we cannot find the talent pool, right? That's often something that you hear. Now, the thing that I know, that if there's a black woman from Bristol who runs a company the size of Amazon, and she says, when she comes into the room, if you don't bring people to this table who look like me and who are able to solve the problems in a very expansive fashion in the way the world is moving, you obviously can't work for us. So I bet you those same organizations that say it's impossible will find a way so they can continue to get billing. We believe in top-down solutions. You would be surprised at the number of people and the kinds of organizations that call us to say, can I get an introduction to Marshmallow? Marshmallow, the founders, the company's 6 years old, the Marshmallow founders were named 51 and 52 on the richest founders, not black, but the richest technology founders in the UK, each worth about 150 million. This is what can happen in a 6-year period. That never happens in a 6-year period working at Goldman, correct? And you don't control those sorts of resources. So I'm constantly saying to people, and one other fact, this is my last fact, I promise, and then we can turn to another topic, I promise. Do you know, what do you think is the difference in net wealth of a person who works for someone else versus someone who owns their own business? In the UK, what do you think is the difference in terms of how much more wealthy a person who's a business owner is than a person who's an employee? And an employee anywhere. I'm talking about the most highly paid employee versus a business owner. What do you think the difference is? 12x. That's exactly what it is. 12 times. So if the end game is, let's be as rich, it's fine, do this. If you want to be as rich as possible, it's very interesting. It's very hard to do that by being an employee for someone else. It just doesn't happen at the same scale. So this has been studied time and time again. And yet what I find when I talk to people, and especially when I talk to bright people from places like Imperial, we continue to work for other people. Now, I understand that we all have black parents, right? I get it. And it's like, I went to law school, right? My parents are they do not have any conception of me being a venture capitalist, but they knew I went to Harvard Law School, right? That went very, very far. My brother's a transplant surgeon. They love that. And my sister is, a television talk show host. They love all of that. That's easy to talk about, right? Yet they're very pleased, and often my first investors in my ventures, because they believe that it's necessary. They understand, I think, over time, that the impacts that can be made are somewhat different if you control the resources versus you are a custodian of the resources. And those are two very different things. So I just say to people who are sitting in the audience, what are you waiting for? You get all that fantastic education, you get all that fantastic experience. The great thing is you get experience, you get paid to get experience as an employee of an organization, and then what do you do with it? There's something else you can do with it sometimes. Not everybody needs to do it, but some people need to do it. And I can't imagine a better place than Imperial. In fact, I worked for 2 Imperial graduates. That's when I first became aware of Imperial, because 2 people and I know there's someone here from the medical school, the only black woman who's on faculty, who is at the medical school, and these were 2 young men from the medical school, Jean Neme and Andre Chow. They started a company called Touch Surgery. I came in as their chief operating officer, and we sold the company, 10 years after they started for $400 million. That's what they didn't go into the NHS for very long, right? And that wasn't going to happen at the NHS. So they took some of that innovative technology and they did something with it. And I think and if they can do it, they're not that special. They're lovely people. I love them to death, but they're not that special. I'm not that special. So there you go. Okay, sorry. Beautiful. That was my half-hour conference. That was my half-hour answer.
Making my job really very easy, very easy. Interesting that you talk about that drive for diversity, that passion for diversity in terms of, this vision of let's say a female black business owner saying, I want my organization to look like this. Mm-hmm. As I've run my business, the number of clients that we've had that have said, wow, our stats look really good on diversity. Mm-hmm. They're really good on gender. Mm-hmm. They're superb in terms of ethnicity, what's going on. And my simple retort every time is, we have a natural sensitivity to diversity. I'm not on a crusade. I'm not looking to change the world. Just my view on the world is different. And that spills through in the team. And that's how you get those breakthrough results. If we don't have people like us in those positions, you're not able to affect change. So I echo some of the stuff that you say there. In terms of not working for somebody, but building your own thing to build wealth. Most of you in this room won't know that my husband left Goldman Sachs paid really well to come and join my business, which is
Excellent.
hilarious.
Excellent.
And he was with me he's been with me for 5 years, and I remember we had the conversation about him leaving, and for 2 weeks I lost sleep. I was like, why would you want to leave Goldman Sachs and come and join my business? Are you crazy? He came and he joined, and we've gone from strength to strength. So that took courage on his side. And I've worked in corporate as well. I've worked with Capgemini, I've worked with Procter & Gamble. And I remember I didn't feel I was getting along fast enough in those firms. I didn't feel I was being heard. I didn't feel that my ambitions were going to be realised. And I saw a problem, and I thought, I'm going to leave. I'm going to set up my own business. I won't burn any bridges because the world is a small world. And also, I owe a lot to Capgemini, I owe a lot to Procter & Gamble. I learned a lot on that voyage. I'm going to take what I've learned, I'm going to start my own business. And I have never looked back. Setting up your own business, if you are that way inclined, is a fabulous alternative to a corporate career. I can't recommend it highly enough. And when you start, you need to cover off all facets of a business. So you're not just thinking about executive headhunting, which is what we do, supporting some really bright CEOs and founders. You have to think about legal. And you have to think about accounting, you have to think about finance and cash flow, and you have to keep all those things going. So there's more than one way to skin a cat. And it's great that it's data-driven, actually. That if you don't work for someone, but you work for yourself, your chances of wealth are 12 times more.
And may I add one thing? The thing that really worries me, you all, so I am an American, so you can probably tell by my accent, right? And I'm very Southern. I was just with my family. The Collinses have been having a family reunion for 70 years, so it's been continuously. And so this last weekend was family reunion in where my family's from. We're from the Eastern Shore of Virginia, which is very isolated. It is on a little peninsula. It's one of the biggest counties in Virginia. It is very, very isolated, and they're only, in the county where my people are from, there are only 11,000 people. Now, we've existed in that county for 300 or so years. You wonder who we married, but we don't talk about that because it gets a little scary, but okay, hopefully. But we know, okay, we'll just leave it there. But I was just there, and the family was talking about sort of what should we be actually doing. That's sort of how our family is. Is there a way for us to activate the resources? So we decided, instead of doing, this is just a small thing, instead of going to a place where we usually go to sort of a resort, we decided to go to a thing called the Mountain Institute, which was started by one of the second president of Tuskegee. Tuskegee is a historically black college and university in the U.S., and he was the second person, Dr. Martin, who then started this. And there, lots of people spent time there. Frederick Douglass, great abolitionist, spent time there. Booker T. Washington, one of the presidents, the first president of Tuskegee, Martin Luther King. They say there's the idea that he started his speech. I have a dream. Was started the outline there. These are things that are happening in those sort of locations. It's a black-owned institution, so we decided, instead of going to a place that was, this beach resort we had been going, where Arnold Palmer and Jack Nicklaus had actually designed the golf course, and most of the landowners were white. Go to this black place and put our money there. If we're going to spend thousands, and in our situation it's almost tens of thousands, why not put it someplace where it actually is a deliberate sort of an approach to utilizing resources? The thing that I also note is that, and I just want to make this as a note based on Michelle's comments, that, look, if you were to look at, and this is what distresses me about the UK, and I've been a citizen in the UK since 2020, is that black women are professional black women are the most ambitious when measured in terms of who wants to be promoted, who wants a leadership role. In the UK, black women are by far the most ambitious. Let's be clear, in terms of professional, that's whether you're in medicine, whether you're in finance, all of those places. This is not talking about people who are in service economy and that sort of thing. This is only talking about professional black women. These are the women who are also well trained. They're fantastic at what they do. It is interesting to note that 2/5 of them say that they are planning on leaving their organization in 2 years. None of them very few are investing heavily in going up the corporate ladder because they feel as though there is no ladder for them to climb. Right, there is a perception by black women here in the UK that there is, because of microaggressions, because of discrimination in terms of hiring, because of racism in terms of promotion, because of differences in terms of development, there is not the ability to stay at that organization because I cannot be fully realized that the organization that I've chosen, that I've been heavily recruited for, and that someone told me when I came in that you're the best thing since sliced bread. And within 2 years, almost half of them wish to leave. That in itself is such an indictment of, and if we're working on sort of issues, we put young people into these organizations, and most organizations who are doing some sort of DEI sort of intervention are doing it at the lower levels. They're not sort of hiring people to be in the C-suite who are Black. They're not hiring women in the sort of the top of the engineering organization. Instead, we're talking very much at the bottom, and then 1 or 2, and then hoping that they'll make it 30 years later, and we can then declare success because one that we hired made it all the way to the top of the organization. And we've seen almost none of those examples here in the UK because smart, hardworking Black people have been going to Imperial, have been going to UAL, have been doing a lot of things for a long period of time. We have not seen that pathway realized in multitudes. And let me be clear, and I try and I look, and we are hard, we work very hard to make sure that we uncover everything that we can and to be as supportive as we can as possible. So for me, those systems feel broken. And the question is, can we take another generation of those broken systems, then breaking another generation of young, dynamic people who are coming in at the bottom of those organizations, and then through mentor schemes and other sorts of things within organizations, feels though that's somehow going to rectify things, and then 30 years later again, either we declare defeat or we declare success. So our point is, look, we agree with you wholeheartedly. Black people and women tend to over-index in terms of hiring Black people and women. There is a presumption of competence. Unless we believe ourselves to be incompetent, we believe other people who look like us to be competent. Now, I know some people feel as though you can't really work with our own, but I'm not one of those. I find that if I'm looking for the person who's going to work with me with the merger and acquisition, I'm looking for a Black woman. If I'm looking for a complex financial transaction and leverage leasing, I'm looking for a Black woman. This is who we always hire. And if people come to us, even in Impact X, we don't have a huge amount of money. It's not like we're not Apollo, right? We're not Blackstone. What we are is a relatively small private equity organization here in the UK, where we still insist that the people that we see are the best, and the people who are the best are women and other people of color. That's just how it is. And that is for us a very catalytic approach to capital, and something that we're extremely deliberate about.
Thank you, Eric. You're not going to know this, but you and I had a really great weekend this weekend.
Did we?
Yeah, we did.
It was okay.
We did.
It was that good. I don't even remember seeing too much drinking.
We were sat outside in the sunshine, and I was reading your book from cover to cover, drinking wine.
Oh.
Had a fabulous time. Absolutely fabulous.
Did you learn anything scandalous about me? Because that's usually what happens when I'm sitting in the sunshine.
Something about you dancing to "It's a Lovely Day."
Absolutely, that was good.
Probably a bit of a mover.
Oh yeah, I can
see the video. I'm sure
I can check a tail feather.
Your book was amazing.
Thank you.
And I'm a scientist by background, peppered with many, many data points. Striking data points, some shocking data points. For example, to the audience. And I wasn't aware of this, I'm no historian, and to my shame I should have known. But did you know that it's taken until 2015 for the UK government to finally clear its debt for compensating the victims of slavery? 2015. And those victims of slavery, so defined in the 1800s, not the slaves themselves, but the slave masters who lost income because everything was brought to a stop. Shame on me for not knowing that, but I learned that from that book. And your data point also super striking, you've touched on it already, that 1 in 2 Black children in the UK today, in 2023, live below the poverty line. And that's in contrast to white counterparts. 1 in 5 white children today live below the poverty line. Super striking. As I read that book and I folded the back page and thought about what I'd learned, for me the clarion call in that book was, and again, you've touched on it already, that we can't really wait for that change. We can't really wait to be tinkering on the edges of DE&I and large corporations to try to affect change.
Yeah.
And that we all here have the capability to, in the words of Barack Obama, be the change. And that we need to be thinking bigger. So that perspective that you have, that book, We Don't Need Permission, is a perspective that I've not really stopped to think about before. And I find that super powerful on a personal level. Can you talk to us a little bit more about the motivations to stop everything that you're doing and write that book? And without giving out spoiler alerts, because you have to read it, it's an amazing book, the key messages that you would want your reader to take from that book?
It was that the 1 in 2 black children living below the poverty line stopped me in my tracks, simply because it means that if we think about sort of the impacts of persistent poverty, the health impacts, the educational impacts, all of those things that we're trying to solve, often people are trying to solve, it's housing and other sorts of things, they try and solve in a piecemeal fashion. They try and do or what I call point solutions, i.e. we then build more social housing and other sorts of things to make sure we try and reduce some elements of rentals and some cost of rental and that sort of thing, which are fantastic, and we should continue to do them. But I thought about how much time it would take for any of these things not just to take hold, but then to actually impact that number of 1 in 2 black children living below the poverty line. And it became clear to me that, we have to have something, unless we're willing to absorb that sort of all the things that happen because of, and all the byproducts that happen because of that. If we're willing to absorb it, that's different, but I'm not willing to absorb it, and I don't think most black people actually are, and I don't think most women actually are. That what I think we have to then do is come up with a strategy to address it, which is a real strategy, but can happen much more quickly. And so that's where the book came, because throughout my professional life, and even when I was very, very young, back in high school, so when I was 18 or 19, I talked about venture capitalism. I talked about this idea of being able to allocate resources. And then as my career developed, although I did attend law school, and the expectation might have been that I'd become a lawyer, and that would be a great thing if I could be a solicitor, a barrister, or a KC, King's Counsel. All that stuff would be great. The question of the impacts that I would be able to make, or I could be, president of the country, or I could be prime minister of the country, all of those impacts that could be made would take a certain amount of time, and there's so many things outside of my control. And I'm a control freak in a little bit, just a tiny bit. So when I'll tell you about my flight across the ocean last night and how this control problem gets really problematic for everyone sitting around me. So as I think about sort of what needs to happen and how to do it quickly, I then started to get these images in my mind. Who did I not know 20 years ago, who I now know and is intimately involved in many elements of my life, either making my life better or miserable? So I thought about a guy named Jeff Bezos. I said, he's a business guy. I didn't really know Jeff Bezos, even though we went to college together. I didn't know Jeff Bezos. I'm like, interesting. Then I thought about Elon Musk, and I said, there's a person who has never held a public position. He's never been elected to anything other than his own board of directors, right? Maybe he's elected every few years. But here's a person who has an inordinate amount of soft and hard power. He has capital. He has sort of a standing to get things done, and he doesn't have to answer. He doesn't seem to even have to answer to his shareholders. He just sort of exists in this different sort of a world. And then I thought about some people that I'd seen who I felt over time had actually behaved in similar fashions, but on a smaller scale. So then I thought about Cathy Hughes. And Cathy Hughes is a Black American woman who started a company called Radio One. She took it public, and she's one of the first Black female made billionaires in the United States. She and Oprah, and then Sheila Johnson of BET fame. So those are some people who have made a great deal of money. I thought about Pat McGrath, and I thought about Pat McGrath, a Birmingham woman who didn't go to university, who has an organization that's worth billions called Pat McGrath Labs. And I was in Selfridges over the holidays, and I was looking at the display for Pat McGrath Labs, and I was very interested in that store within a store, and I was thinking about sort of her impacts. And I said, look, these are individuals who, because of what they have done, and again, it doesn't require them to ask anyone else's permission, have built behemoths of organizations and are able to utilize the hard and soft power associated with this to change the world. And in fact, if you were looking at, so the person who's gone from industrialist to like Bond villain, which is Elon Musk, right? He used to be sort of interesting. Now he's really like a Bond villain, isn't he? So he is a guy who is able to. Remember, he was in Ukraine. He was giving away the satellite communication, and then he said, "No, you have to pay for it."
Yeah.
It's like, so he says, no, you can't fight the war the way you want to because I want you to pay for it. It's like, that's an interesting piece of power. He's a person who's digging up lots and lots of natural resources in the conversation about conservation, and everyone thinks about him as a great conservationist, but he even has a plan B that if we ruin this world, he has a way of transporting us to another. And you're sort of like, is there a black woman in the world or a black man in the world who has the ability to be on the front page of every newspaper, and anytime she sneezes, even Kamala Harris, anytime who is the second most powerful person in the world, doesn't have that kind of hard or soft power. And, Kamala had to go through how many, she was a fantastic jurist, she was a fantastic senator, she's a fantastic, student, and then she's a fantastic vice president. But there's so many steps that could have gone horribly wrong to get her to that point. And then we see her not being very powerful, right? So then the question of, is there a way for us to do that in a concerted fashion and to do it for more than one person? It doesn't just need to be one Elon Musk, we could have dozens. So for me, it showed that there's a way to actually build organizations relatively quickly, organizations that then are able, and let's be clear, everything that Jeff Bezos has done, everything that Elon Musk has done, everything that Cathy Hughes has done is like catching lightning in a bottle. It is not done very frequently, but there are pathways to get it done. And those pathways are things that we have not fully exploited as black people. So I wanted to try some other things. We've marched, we've appeased, we've collaborated, we've sued. All those things are great also. We should continue doing them. But what we've never done is control the resources that we have. Every time any of us wants to do anything, almost any time any of us wants to do anything, and it needs money, who do we go to? You have to go to someone white, right? It could be called the government. It could be called, sort of gatekeepers. But generally, it could be called the bank. But generally, you're going to white decision makers. And it's fine. But if we look at sort of banking as just a subset of this, women who have the same, black men and black women who have the same financial records, have the same tenure of their company, have the same turnover as their company, are 4 times less likely to get a loan here in the UK. I'm like, dudes, are we going to continue to focus on trying to get those organizations to change, or are we going to have to do something a little bit different? We have to try a different strategy. So we need to control more resources. That's the long and short of it, and we need to be able to do. Again, I haven't said this, but I don't care what you do with your resources. I just want you to have more of them. All right, I just want you to have more of them. Black Brits have, as compared to their white counterparts, they have 1/8 the net wealth. So a white Brit has like 197,000 in net wealth, and a black Brit has about 24,000 in net wealth. That's what we control. 8 times less. So that means we can't borrow against our houses. We don't own houses. We don't have as high wages, so we don't necessarily have great savings. So all of those things are contributing to the inability to then build these businesses. I'm not saying, and in venture capital, there's so few of us that are actually putting money. I said 1%, we got 3,000 companies and less than 30 have gotten money from us. We're not the answer. We need more capital that's actually going out there and more organizations.
It's interesting that you remark on that. I remember the early days of my business. I started my business with £7,000 of my own personal savings. So I left corporate, and you have to work really hard to earn the money that was earning in corporate. But I did it, and I left. And I took the £7,000 of personal savings, and I started this business. And I figured it would cover my bills for a month or so, but I was going to have to work really quickly to generate revenue, generate profit, so that I could wipe my face. That was number one imperative. And as we were starting to scale and to grow, I came across the old age problem. It hit me square in the face of cash flow, which I'd never really stopped to think about. And I'm getting all of these great invoices coming in, I'm generating all of this great cash, and I need to pay it out. And there's an imbalance in terms of the money coming in and the money going out. It puts you in a pinch point. And then going to the bank and saying, do you think you can help me? Here's what's coming in, here's what's going out. It made perfect sense to me as a scientist. Cut me some slack. Didn't want to know. And I don't know if that's because of how I look. I certainly know it wasn't because of my capability and how I conveyed myself, but it wasn't enough for them. But surprise, surprise, when I met my first million, they're knocking on the door going, I think we can help you. Let me help you with all of this debt. But in a way, it was a gift to me because they enabled me to look around the problem in a different way. So I looked at cash flow and it's like, well, we need to change the terms. I can't be extending all of these 60-day, 90-day payment terms to the likes of IBM and Tesco and goodness knows what. We need to bring those terms right in. I want them really tight. And if we can't work to those terms, I'm not going to work with you. I'm not going to rely on the bank for the loan. And I'm going to make sure that we get that money just in time so that when we pay it out to everybody, everybody's happy and I don't need a bank. But it's a shame that I had to be creative to think around that problem. It's great in the end, but it's a shame that I wasn't able to immediately get access to capital and just carry on the focus of scaling and growing and having somebody on my side that was going to help me take that business forward. On the subject of cash flow, Wayne, you've heard me say this before, but I also run my business super conservatively, so I have a massive time till death in my business. And I always like to keep a stash of cash in my business in case anything goes wrong. And when COVID hit, I had that big comfort there, thankfully, so that we could try and ride out what was going on until we could figure out which way was up. Okay, so economic activist, Eric Collins, you don't mind if I call you that? I think that's appropriate.
I like it.
Yeah, I think that's a good badge for you. I think it's an excellent badge for you.
It's better than what my mom calls me. Okay. All right. When she's unhappy.
You've got loads of data points up here.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's anything in here that you want to draw on, or if we should now maybe go to the audience for questions. How do you want to play the next stage, Eric?
I think I would say one thing about the data. I mean, we can flash through some of the data, you all, and it's not meant to be depressing. This is not what why I do any of these sort of data-driven conversations. The reason I give you the data is because when I am asking, or most people when I'm doing a session, is I'm really asking for us to think together about how we can solve the problem. I'm not here to entertain people with sort of, and regale them with stories of my life. I'm here to talk about what can you do to sort of change the discourse. Because next year, if I were to come back, I'd like it to be a very different conversation about what we have done and how we have actually progressed in some very significant and measurable ways. So this is the reality of the situation. I don't think many people understand the dire nature of existence. We hear all the time, well, Eric, this is what I hear. I've been here 10 years now, and it's like, Eric, there are very big differences between the UK and the US. In terms of race and other sorts of things, and the approach that is a very activist and in-your-face approach here in the U.S. is one that doesn't necessarily go over very well here in the UK. And I always say, then, well, tell me, is it going over so well here? Are you doing so great? I mean, and so I have to constantly, and I put my shoulder to the wheel here in the UK. I live in Wapping, right? I exist here. I came home. I was at the reunion. I came here. I'm not still in the States. I came back to where my business is because I do believe that there's an opportunity, and I think that there is, and this is a great place to incubate some great ideas. And I think there's such talent, including the talent in this room, that can be brought to the table and can make things happen. And it's a smaller country also with fewer sort of barriers in some ways than doing things in the United States. And that's one of the reasons why I'm here. I would say one of the more disturbing facts for me, and one of the reasons why I think that it is absolutely imperative that we work on issues that have sort of byproducts that are absolutely damaging and damning here in the UK, is the statistic that you all recently heard, and all of us heard, about Black mortality in childbirth. It is ridiculous, and hear me say this, it is ridiculous that a rich Black woman in the UK, we're not talking about middle class, we're talking about a rich Black woman in the UK, is 22% more likely to die in childbirth than a poor white woman. Rich Black woman, poor white woman, she has a higher likelihood of being able to survive. These sorts of things exist and are endemic. If you want to work on these issues, I'm not saying I'm going to solve this problem today, but if that's an issue you want to work on, I have fun going to the government and asking them for money and to change their priorities. Feel free. I wonder what's going to happen there, but I say feel free to do that. My thought is, if we think that is the most important thing that we need to focus on so that our sisters, our mothers, our children are not dying, then where's the money that we can put together in order to do this? And I believe, it'd be great the day that, Pat McGrath has the same amount of capital at her disposal as Elon Musk, or Bill Gates. She doesn't have it at the moment, but there's something that we still have to do today, and then build a Pat McGrath with that sort of capital behind her, and who has an affinity for this country and the problems that exist in this country. So we need to be doing that. And the only other thing that I would say is, what could this group, if you give me one more moment, what could this group be doing together? You've come together as an alumni association. These are Black alumni. You've had some events. So what are you going to do with it? And is there something, is there a goal or an outcome that we think makes sense? I'm looking at your ages. I'm trying to calculate your ages, but what doesn't crack, so I can't tell. You all might be 120, or you might be 20. But so I'm going to look around. I'm going to say. So I would assume there are thousands of years worth of experience here, from childhood to adulthood, and there are at least hundreds. And quite frankly, leveraging that kind of an expertise and putting all of our shoulders to a wheel, I don't care what it is, but all of us saying that this is what we want this organization to measurably impact, and by this time next year, we want this to be solved, is what I'd really like to see happen. And I'd like you all, at some point, hopefully today, to commit to what those problems are and what are the ways in which we wish to solve them together. I think it's consequential that whenever we get together, whether it be in church or whether it be in the restaurant or whether it be here in this kind of an event, that we come forward with, and this is what we're going to do coming out of here. This is how we're changed forever. And not because of anything I said, but because of those terrible statistics. This is how we're changed forever and motivated and empowered to do something. That was it.
So we have homework to do, people. Tell me your plane story. I'm curious.
Okay, look, so I started off life as a you read this, right? And in fact, the book starts in an airport, right? So I do not like flying. Don't like it at all. And I fly all the time. I am the most nervous flyer in the world, because anytime you feel a bump, the plane's going down. That's me. It's just, I don't know what it is, but I don't like amusement park. I don't like anything that sort of has that kind of thing. And it's a control issue. And sort of yesterday, if you've been watching the news in the United States, we've had some of the most ferocious thunderstorms and tornadoes that have been happening on the East Coast. And I'm on the East Coast, and I'm in Washington, D.C. We had rain and thunderstorms there, and then all the way up the East Coast. And so we're flying. And I'm thinking, I had actually called Kellyanne to say, or written a note to say, it might not happen, because, I'm not getting on the plane. But she didn't realize that's what I'm really saying. But I'm saying the plane might be canceled. I might be canceled. But so we get on the plane, and we get on at 10 o'clock, and it's not even delayed. It's just like we're going no matter what. It's like it's like, what is that Top Gun? It's like, yeah, we're going to fly no matter what. Let's just do it. And so we take off, and we start flying, and there are all these thunderstorms all around. You can just see the thunderstorms. I'm watching these flashes, these spectacular flashes of lightning. And there's this little boy next to me. I don't know who this person was. And, he's sort of sitting there calmly watching. And at some point I grabbed the poor child's arm because, something happens. And it's just like, this is, and you're sitting here saying to yourself, some large black man sitting next to some child, grabbing the child. It's like, it's just all bad. Something bad's going to happen here. So in any case, I made it here. I didn't get arrested, and he made it also. So whoever the young man, I didn't even get his name, but he knew that he needed to help me to get through that flight. So that was good.
So we see that Eric is human.
Yeah. Oh God.
And that he doesn't bite.
Yeah.
Do we have any questions for the man?
And can you tell me who you are? And can we get the microphone? They said you didn't have to do anything; it would just come on.
Hello, thank you for your amazing talk. I'm feeling really pumped. My name is Amma, and I'm currently running a maths tuition platform for students to help raise their grades. And I really wanted to ask about your mission with the firm. You've got such a fabulous ambition. I was wondering, what's the reasons other people don't see the opportunity within Black individuals?
Here in the UK, you see the statistic about Oxford. I did not realize until a few years ago that Oxford University with its, 36, 38 colleges, had never until recently actually admitted sufficient numbers of black students to have even one black student per college. So you say to yourself, here's a country where there are thousands of students that are admitted to Oxford, Cambridge, and then other brick institutions in these fantastic places, Imperial too. And all of this, and there is a perception that these organizations are getting it right, right? They're getting it right, but getting it right means there's no representation that actually exists. And so I said to someone the other day, I was speaking at an organization, OMERS, which is the Ontario Municipal Employees Retirement System. They are a very big asset allocator in North America. And so I was talking to some of their teams the other day. They wanted me to come in and talk about the book. And so there are like 50, 75 people in the room. And so I'm chatting with them just a little bit. And I said, I had thought that we had addressed the issue of black competence in the UK and in Europe decades ago. I was under the impression that everyone had black classmates. I was under the impression everyone had black teammates, at least. I was under the impression that everyone had at least listened to black music. And that one of those ways there had been this infusion of, there's a connection between all this sort of greatness and then in close proximity, and therefore all this contribution that can be made. What I began to realize is that networks, particularly when I'm in the business of money allocation and sort of me acquiring money in blind pools that I can then invest in other sorts of things, there is such a focus on collegiality and network. And those collegial networks are have historically been considered appropriate and even contemporarily considered appropriate, sometimes even by black people, and that their exclusion, their systematic, because you can't even, if you were just doing things statistically, it's almost impossible to get the numbers that we have. It's just impossible. I mean, how do you actually have, if you're 3.3% of the population, you imagine every place has at least 3.3% of the population, it's impossible not to, unless you're sort of systematically doing something in the alternative. And so for me, it was a very big aha moment when I realized that indeed network is so very important, that collegiality is so important, the back channel is so important, and that black people are excluded at almost every level from that. And that it's considered okay that everyone went to Eton and Harrow, who's been, and then Oxford and Cambridge, who's been a prime minister of the country, that's considered okay and the appropriate answer, and that's what keeps the UK great. All of those things are, for me, they were such cautionary. It just caused me to have to take a breath and say, there's something that's going on that I just don't comprehend, and that I need to spend a little bit more time on. Why is it that we are in a world where, where people of color outnumber everyone else, and there is such an adherence to white supremacy in this particular space? I've never seen anything like it. I come from the American South. I've never seen this. I come from where the Klan's from. I've never seen this. And it's so subtly done in every way, sort of reinforced in so many ways. I was watching the BBC the other day. I watch the BBC at the gym sometimes. And I sit there and watch. Every expert is a white expert for every topic outside of black. Every person. I mean, it's like we're talking about dogs, we're talking about gardens, we're talking about cooking, we don't eat, we don't garden, we don't like pets. Then we're talking about economics, then we're talking about the world. I noticed a little bit sometimes, and there's another. So I'm giving you more information about myself. So then there are these other television. There's Channel 4, which is always advertising naked attraction. So it's like, yeah, whatever. And then there is is it ITV? And then I see a little something different there. But BBC, which is where most people and most viewership actually is, I noticed that there is this real. There's this real sort of inherent approach that the people who you can have confidence in and giving an opinion and helping you to understand the world are these people. And these people we don't march out until there's something that we need them to comment on. Good Morning Britain's the same way. So I find it very, and I can't even hear it. I'm just reading the subtitles and just looking to see what the article is and what they're talking about, and I'm like, boy, it just keeps on getting reinforced and reinforced and reinforced and reinforced and reinforced. Oh, now we have a lot of questions. See?
You switched the lights on.
Well.
Let's go with the chap in the back with his hand raised will work forward.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Eric. Wonderful talk. I was actually sitting at the edge of my seat all through. I'm currently doing my PhD at the Department of Electrical Engineering.
Well done. So we'll be seeing you starting a company immediately, right?
I really do hope so. And my question is with regards to that. You mentioned a couple of niche areas where you are interested in investing, and that's because of the dominance of Black people in that area. Yeah. So I'm thinking of doing something in the energy space to handle constraint management, because there's a lot of lost revenue due to transmission constraints. So what extra bits would you love to see from someone who is not specifically within the niche that your company targets in order to offer some kind of support?
So just the two things. One is, and with most of us in the venture space, what we're really looking for are solutions that are also not so capital intensive. So things that have physical product are really a challenge. I have so many good creators who are thinking about sort of creating the next energy cell. And that's kind of hard. There's a group in, have you ever heard of Acceleron? Acceleron's fascinating to me. So they've discovered that indeed, if you have renewable energy and you're storing it in batteries, batteries have cells, and sometimes cells go wrong. And the way that most batteries are put together is in a closed system. It's a sealed system that you can't repair. It's just there. And if something goes wrong with one cell, you can't even diagnose it. You just have to throw away the whole thing and then go to the next and then try again. So they have another system that's actually able to use this and can be used in it can be easily assembled, easily serviced. Also, using the Internet of Things is also reporting all the time what's going on, so that we can also deal with the life cycle of some of these products. Fantastic organization. For us, we actually tried to get into that deal, which is a physical products deal, but it was more the design that they were doing, and then they were using the IP, and they could license the IP to various places. That for us, we love. So the idea of designing something, whether or not it's patented, we don't care so much, but licensing normally requires a patent or something to protect you. Maybe it's a first mover advantage, or maybe it's a brand that's associated with it, but something that protects you so that you're then able to move it forward. Those are the types of organizations that we also believe have an opportunity for a very rapid exit, because there are other organizations that it just makes great sense for them to be within their portfolio. The other thing that I would love to see for a young entrepreneur is, if you're graduating with a PhD, if you're graduating with a PhD in computer vision or artificial intelligence, and you're coming out of Stanford, you can raise, $50 million today. If you are graduating here in the UK, you can raise, a good deal of capital, but it would be something that your dissertation, the work that you're doing with your professors, are on trend in that respect. Or you've spent a little bit of time in one of the bigger applied organizations. So if you spend a little bit of time at DeepMind or something like that, when I say a little bit of time, I mean more than 2 months, but less than 10 years, then you are in a position, big brains there, huh? But something like a year or two would help us to see that you've been through some cycles, you've developed some products, we can attribute it to you, and that then helps us. And then the last thing is, we'd like to see you with some co-founders. No one wants to, no one thinks about sort of if you lose sort of, for some reason you just don't want to do it anymore. Or, for instance, you get knocked down by a bus or something has to continue. So we need people who are actually, and it helps us to see you're able to work with others. So to actually have some co-founders is a good thing. Was that okay?
Yeah, extremely.
Okay, thank you.
Lady in the back.
So I'll end that.
Hi, thank you both for, I'm a bit short. Thank you guys for a really good presentation. It was really insightful. I have 2 questions. I hope that they both make sense. So the first one is, how do you work your way around finding the right partners? And I say this because you did mention that most of the people with resources or decision-making abilities might not be Black or might not look like you. So how do you work around making sure that you have a mutually beneficial partnership to start that business? And my second question is whether you could talk us through, actually both of you, because you do fit the profiles, whether you could talk us through the transition and thought process between working in industry and then starting your own business. Like, what kind of resources or people were the most helpful and influential in getting you through that?
Do you want to start?
Yeah, so transitioning out of corporate and into starting my own business, the driver was I wasn't getting far enough along fast enough. It was as simple as that. And I just didn't think I was going to get to where I needed to get to in any kind of reasonable time. And I had personal aspirations for my life. Some were lifestyle wishes, other things. They were motivators. But I also spotted an opportunity to be able to improve things. So they say mother is a necessity of need. I figured that I'd landed on a problem that was quite easy for me to fix, to be fair, and that my competition hadn't seen. And I joke with clients even now that I don't know the first thing about recruitment because I was never a trained recruiter. My corporate career was in technology. I was a management consultant, and I would advise clients on major implementations of SAP across the world, in Russia, in Switzerland, whatever it was, but with a focus on life sciences. But what I found was, as we were augmenting our teams, I was getting CVs coming through from HR, which were frankly inappropriate. I'm working literally 24 hours a day, and at the end of the day, I need to go through a stack of CVs about this high. It was before the internet really took off properly, and I'm having to go through paper CVs and just thinking, I've just wasted 3 hours and we haven't got the person that we need. So I thought, let me start a business whereby, as a technologist, I'd be able to make a call as to what a busy hiring manager wants to see and what a good technology choice is in a candidate and a strong candidate, and we've got the capability to be able to competently interview them. So they were the drivers for me to start the business. I thought I couldn't fail. It wasn't easy to start with, but I took the knowledge that I had, I ran with it, and so here I am today. Don't burn any bridges, you never know, when you may need somebody, but equally, I kind of believe in business karma. So if you do good in the world, it comes back to you. If you do bad in the world, it comes back to you. If somebody crosses you, you don't need to correct it. Somebody else in the universe will deal with them, but just focus on the prize. Making that transition, if you've got a really good business solution to a problem, actually is quite straightforward. It takes some nerve, but it's okay.
I love that. I do, and I love this idea that there is karma. I do believe there's karmic debt that gets paid immediately. So I would say that I'm going to start with the question about the right partners. I think many people. What do you all think about mentoring? Do you like mentoring? Think it's an important part of? I'm very anti-mentoring. But this is the reason, because I think it's the way that I've seen mentoring happen. I would love to see people who are coming to be mentored with a plan that they want to sort of test with an individual who is more experienced than them and say sort of, how would you tweak this plan to make it sort of more workable? The idea of going and having lunch and sort of, having tea once a week in order to talk about sort of issues and sort of problems has never been my idea of how we get people sort of prepared for the next step. I like the idea of having someone who is more a supporter. Now, that I like a great deal within an organization. So someone who handles all the things which are necessary, both explicitly and implicitly, to make a career really work. And that is, you need someone who's talking in the back channel, as a back channel, and who is enfranchising the organization to help move you along. One of my investors and someone who's a friend is a woman named Ursula Burns, who was the first black woman to be chair and CEO of a Fortune 500 company. She was chair and CEO of Xerox. She left that position in 2016 and has since been doing a variety of other things. She's on the board of Uber. She's on the board of ExxonMobil. She's on the board of the Ford Foundation. She's on the board of MIT. She's on the board of Endeavor, the entertainment firm. She's boarded up. She is a person who got to her, but one of the reasons why she was successful is because someone who was serving on the board at the time was a guy named Vernon Jordan, who's sort of the granddaddy of black business in the United States. Vernon Jordan can be personally credited with helping to make her a CEO. Ken Chenault, the president of the CEO of American Express, Darren Walker, the CEO and head of the head of the Ford Foundation, Ken Frazier, who is at Merck as the head of that organization. These things don't just happen, right? Someone has to help to make these things happen. There are dozens and dozens, in fact, there are probably hundreds and hundreds of people who are in organizations who are there to get to the top. And for various reasons, we get peeled off and various other things happen and other opportunities come about. But, it takes a bunch to get a person to be a CEO of a very big organization. There's, in fact, a thing called the Black CEO bump. You might have heard about this. That when a black person is named CEO of a Fortune 500 company in the United States, their stock increases upon that announcement. When a white person is announced, the stock goes down. The reason being that black people are not promoted into potential. They have to have proven over a period of time that they're able to do this job many times over. White people are not. White men, it's on white women, it's different. White men are not. They can be given an opportunity, and so to say that we believe you have the potential to do this, that doesn't happen to black people. So when black people come in, the markets look at them and say, this is a person who has a lot of experience, they're in good hands. The other people are like, good, who are they? And sort of how did they get this role? So it's a very interesting sort of a dynamic. I would say that gives the example of how you find the right sort of people with whom to partner. I believe, and so putting it all together, the question of me being mentored is never what I've actually sought. And I've had many people who we call mentors, I call them supporters. But the way that I engage those supporters is I try and do things for them. I try and add value to their careers and make myself helpful in what they're trying to accomplish. It's not just about me and sort of what I want to accomplish. It's what are you trying to do as a senior black person within an organization? That's one of the things. I choose very carefully the kinds of organizations that I enter based on who's there. I'd love to enter an organization, some of the big brands around the world, but I see there have been people who've been smarter than me, people who've been more tenacious than I am, people who've been better trained than I am, who can't make it in those organizations. What possible way do I have of making it? It's just going to, as you said, it's just going to take too long. And there are too many things that have to happen. There's some things like Barack becoming president that, you know, you should try, you should work at that. But there are other things. It's like, nah, I can do better things with my time than that. But choosing your partners is very, very important. I think by providing value to them, your partners and the real sort of enduring partners become apparent. And then the last thing is the transition. I'm sort of like you. I had to transition. I mean, I was a C-suite exec in 4 different companies that sold to American public companies. So I've been as chief operating officer. This is my first time being a CEO, but I've always been a chief for the last 20 years. So I've had an opportunity to spend a lot of time in very rarefied rooms in fast growth organizations. And I think that for me, it became very clear that even when I was a strategy consultant, which is what I did right out of law school, sort of like you, that my position of being so close to power was very intoxicating, because if you're in the right kind of firm, you're working with sort of key decision makers in every organization. And then that's what you want to do, and that's what you believe life should be like. And then you go into a company and it's like, that's not what my life is like at all. My life is way down the pecking order. And so then I decided that I'd go to smaller organizations where I could actually help, and things could be attributed to me. And that's another big thing. You need attribution. People can make a direct line between what's happening and what you've done. Not your team, but what you've done. And so then that happened in these organizations, and then I became known for that, and then I began to be recruited for that, for the ability to make things done, to get things done as sort of a turnaround exec. That's kind of what happened. You're welcome.
Okay, we've got time for 2 more questions.
And if I stop answering for such long periods of time, we probably have time for 10. All right?
Or 3 really quick ones, really quick, so I can see 1, 2, 3. Lady with the hooped earrings, and then chap behind, and the chap with the red lanyard, and then we're done.
Wow. Okay.
Hi, I'm Sarah, ranking professor in Faculty of Medicine. So I've got some facts and figures for you, because I know you like them. So are you aware of Imperial Enterprise Lab? Okay. So Imperial Enterprise Lab, what I'm doing is thinking about the project for this group, suggesting one option. So Imperial Enterprise Lab typically engages with around 2,000 students a year. And in the last 4 years, they've had over 200 student startups, generated 200 million in investment. And from the data suggests that 70% of those have a 3-year survival rate.
Great.
I don't know how that looks.
That's a very high survival rate.
Okay. Great news for you. So Imperial, 5-6 years ago, obviously this issue about female, we are trying to be the change in terms of women at Imperial, and that's something that has been going on for many years. When I joined Imperial, there were no female professors. Now 65% of my department, women
Great.
professors.
Excellent.
So talking about being the change. In terms of getting more female entrepreneurs, we set up a specific program called We Innovate. And now we have 40% of our founders are female that come through the Enterprise Lab. So what I'm interested in doing and thinking about, we have set up last year something called Imperial B, which is for Black entrepreneurship. And we have been running a series of events. We have our next event coming up on the 19th of July. You will all be receiving info about it. And where we will be showcasing some of our young black entrepreneurs and also having keynote speaker. But what we would really like to do is to start the same sort of program where we specifically have a program for black entrepreneurs. And what I would like to do as well is to open it up more broadly, not to just Imperial students, but to friends like here from the University of Arts, so we can have sort of more interdisciplinary groups, and some of those other great institutions that are in our area, like the RCA, the RCM, where they have very few, we think we have low numbers of black students, but they have
almost none.
You can count them on your hand. So, yeah.
I think, so can I just say one quick thing. So the interesting thing for me is, if the group decided, how would you like to engage with student innovation? Do you want to create, and my point is, I do not think that you should be investing. Again, I think that there's enough grant funding. There's never enough grant funding. Let me put that differently. There's some grant funding. I think there's never any risk funding for organizations that are built to make money. Social people look at black people. In the name Impact X, maybe you won't be surprised with this. As soon as I walk in the room, Impact X, and then Eric Collins walks in, and it's automatically that we are a social organization, right? That we are there for, not social change, which we are there for, but that we are an organization that's a charity. And that's exactly what people think. It's like, you're very good at charitable work. You're very good at getting grants, but can you really return capital? It's like, that's something other people do, not you. So I go through that all the time. And if you're going to do this, then I do believe that it is very, very useful. I think it is extremely effective to incubate, because you all know the smarts that are available and the resources that are available in this institution. I think it's a great idea. The thing that I would encourage you to do is to make sure that you're looking then for things which are for organizations and opportunities to invest your time and money. And I think you should pool your money also, is ones that are going to return capital. You want to return capital. That's the only way, that's the only sustainable model. Charitable giving can stop at any point, right? The only thing that doesn't is if you make money for other people, then people will say, well, let's give that person more money to make more money. So those are the sorts of things. So be careful about that. That's the only thing I would say. And then the study that I talked to you about that Extend Ventures did, it was called Diversity Beyond Gender, because here in the UK, based on the Rose Report and other sorts of things, we have gotten a focus, and white women in particular, we have had some real advancements that have been made. The race report that was done, I don't even know what it was called, a few years ago, just hasn't had that same sort of an impact. We've never had that impact in terms of that.
Conscious of time, I'm really sorry, you're going to have to ask a rapid fire question. Eric with a rapid fire answer.
Okay, oops.
You can get the chap with the lanyard to give his question to, and then we're done. I'm getting looks.
Let's take them both at the same time.
Can you hear me? Okay.
There you go.
Sorry. I thank you both, and thank you, Eric. Also, I want to echo our colleague earlier, I also sort of reached out to you on LinkedIn, probably don't remember, but you responded, and I was quite surprised, but pleasantly surprised. So it just shows your character there. So thank you.
That's two. Okay.
So I'm actually from Imperial College, Enterprise Division.
Oh, you are. Okay.
I completed my PhD some years ago. I worked at a Harvard spin-out, found myself back at Imperial, done a full loop. Just shows the quality of Imperial. But my question to you is about impact tech capital. You mentioned earlier a vast amount of opportunities you reviewed, and I think it was 1% of those, and it got me thinking about, the ones that got away and fear of missing out, and does ImpactX sort of maintain an anti-portfolio to then track those opportunities and see how they're developing, and then learn from the decisions that's been made and think about how can we make sure we're not missing out on any.
Great. Oh, yes. So let's get the second question, and then we can answer.
Cool. So I'm Ryan from KPMG. I'm also a growth consultant.
So you're on the consulting side?
Management consulting.
Okay.
So one of the things that we also do is run a program called the Black Entrepreneur Awards. So it's 100K free cash prizes in the UK. Obviously, from the stats, we can see that black founders are less likely to have the obvious indicators of being successful, right? Obvious indicators of being outliers. So when there's less traction or they haven't gone to one of the really top units, what are some of the indicators that you look for to say, successful?
Okay.
And can I just grab just one more question, since you're going to get all three by yourself?
Thank you.
Oh, yes. Oh, I'm sorry. It wasn't your question. Okay, yes. Yes, indicators. Yep.
Okay, thank you. I am similar to you, so I come from a legal background, so I'm an M&A lawyer looking to make the switch into VC, but I wrote down my question. So basically, I'm curious to know which industries or sectors you are currently witnessing a significant presence of Black business, particularly in the VC space, and are there any emerging trends or areas of opportunity where Black people are making a notable difference?
Okay. All right. May I handle these? All right. Notable difference. Great. All right. So I would say, so starting at the first question, so ImpactX does continue to track the companies in which we don't invest. And, we might call it our regret book. It's kind of like my closet and the pension I had for Plaid at one point. There are lots of regrets there. So Audio Mob is an example of this, and Gravity Sketch. These are two companies that got away and have done very, very well, have gone from strength to strength. One we didn't invest in because we felt that the valuation was too high during the frothy. There's a buzzy period where there are huge valuations, and we thought the valuation was too high, and we couldn't support it with our analytics. And then the Gravity Sketch, we were kept out. My old chair of the board of my company that I'd been in previously as COO called Touch Surgery, Touch. That's the guys from Imperial who started it. One of the partners kept us out of the deal because they wanted the whole thing. We had gotten agreement to get into the deal, and they wanted the whole thing. So we look at those and we regret them. They recently sold. So those are some examples, and we think it's very important to be able to sort of shadow what your performance would have been with things that you didn't choose. With KPMG, I'm always interested in seeing people from KPMG. Do you know Richard Inferenta? So he is our billing partner. So that's why we came to KPMG, because we have a Black billing partner there. And on our team, we have a lot of Black women. So that's important to us. I'm glad that you're there. The other indicators that we do focus on that we think are absolutely imperative, there are. What we're really looking for is not so much, we don't look at those, the school that you went to, because it doesn't necessarily compute in the same way for us. What does compute, though, is evidence of tenacity. And when I'm saying evidence of tenacity, it doesn't, when you come to me and say that I started off in hard circumstances because I lived on a housing estate and then I went on to do these things, that's not the tenacity that we're talking about. We're talking about the tenacity that you've been able to build relationships with individuals who have had confidence in you in a number of different spaces. That's the sort of thing. So if you are sort of in a job and you went to another job because your boss took you with them to another space, that shows that you have not only been good at building relationships, but then you have had enduring relationships, even if it's a short period of time, and that you've had such extreme value that someone else vouches for you in that particular way. That's an example of something that could actually be another. It's just one small example, but tenacity is something you'd be very surprised the number of good ideas that we have, the number of great teams we have, and the people who just lose heart because at some point, and people have obligations. You might not be able to get paid because of cash flow. You might not be able to take any, and there are all sorts of things. And if you're supporting a family, an extended family, and you sort of are a primary breadwinner, there are certain things that make it very difficult to continue down a certain kind of a line. And if you don't have the right support at home, which you and your husband you talked about, your husband joining you, that's the right sort of support. Many people just don't have that. They want to go on vacation, or they need to go on holidays. Like, well, we can holiday house, or we have this business that we build. It's like, you get a choice. And sometimes people choose the wrong, in that situation, the wrong choice. But that's just me. Pretend I didn't say that. All right, remember, go buy a house. Don't hear me saying don't buy a house. Buy a house. And then finally, my summers in law school, I worked at Skadden Arps in the merger and acquisition department. I commend you because they killed me. I think they actually tried to do me off that summer that I was there. What I would say, when I look at the various places that Black people are playing, and I think making extreme connections and sort of adding extreme value that's recognized easily by the marketplace, some of the places are very stereotypic. Entertainment is something. So any entertainment tech and that type of thing, which is associated, a lot of prop tech I see. It's amazing how much property tech I see out of the Black community. Those are interesting areas. Those are not the areas that are getting the highest valuations. What is getting the highest valuation are, at this point, the question of sort of generative AI and sort of the data sets which are associated, which is where the real value is. It's not necessarily on top of the OpenAI makes available all of the sort of tooling that you need. It's the underlying data set, which is the proprietary piece. I don't see us having created a lot of that. There are a few companies, even like Treasure Trust, who do have deep wells. Black Ballad probably has very deep wells of information about a specific demographic. So they have built up some IP in that respect. But I don't see a lot of organizations that are in that space. Applied AI, I see a huge number of organizations that are saying, through the use of AI tools, we are able to do things more quickly and more easily. The thing that I think is a very bad example, though, and I see very frequently happening, is people who have what is really a consulting practice and then trying to translate it into a fast growth organization. Not because it's a bad idea, that's a great idea. My first company was like that. But I took on a partner who was a technologist, because I was not a technologist. And what I find is that many people are making the continual mistake of saying that what I can do is I can actually describe what I want to have happen, and I can have someone build it cheaply in Romania, India, Nigeria. That's the wrong approach. If you're building a technology company, you need a technical founder. And so the thing that I find is making a lot of organizations stumble is still that we have too few people who are starting technology-driven companies and technology-enabled companies, and who have a strong investment in technology on their core team. That's an unfortunate bit.
And take a breath. Thank you, Eric.
Thank you. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Michelle. That was wonderful.
1, 2. Wasn't that amazing? Yeah, I learned so much. We learned a lot about Eric as well. If at the end of this session you were planning to approach him to ask him to be your mentor, please don't. Yeah, be your supporter. Yeah, right. Change your nomenclature. A couple of quick things. I've never been asked to do closing remarks before, but I'm gonna have a shot. I think I'll go straight to the procedurals. If you can stay, and by all means, we have time. We have some food and drink outside. So number one, please do stick around. Okay. Eric talked about the power of the network, right? So he spoke about obviously being in these institutions. And then leveraging the network. We are at one of those institutions. We are connected to one of these institutions, and actually looking around here, you are power brokers. So we should all know each other. If you want to be part of the LinkedIn alumni group, please make sure that either you see Ten or I or Kellyanne. We've got the QR code to be part of the LinkedIn group. That's one way, one of the key ways that we continue to stay connected and communicate. We've also got an informal WhatsApp group. You're looking at me because you're going to put something on. Yeah. We've got an informal WhatsApp group, so by all means, again, find us and we'll add you to that. Engage in the network. Again, this idea of the network is only as good as what we put in. And Eric has talked about this call to action. So one of the things that we've been discussing as a committee is actually having a follow-on workshop where we can discuss some of the things that Eric has raised, and also Michelle has given us examples of. So we can talk a bit more, and hopefully be in a position where we can help others like the young PhD student out there. I can say young because he calls me uncle, right? So is planning to put together. Okay. Anything else from a procedural point of view that I need to? No. Okay, we're good. So from a rounding up the things that resonated with me, the things that I heard Eric and speak about and resonated with me. Clearly, we've spoken about the power of Black empowered individuals, and if you haven't read the book, and if you're reading the book, you'll come across this as a powerful bit where he speaks about just being in the room full of other Black people who have achieved things, and to know that. And he's very honest to be able to say that he's achieved what he's achieved by virtue of that network. We can also leverage our networks. I guess the problem, many of us normally see diversity as a problem. And what I hear Eric say is, look, it's actually a market inefficiency and it's an opportunity. You know, we shouldn't see the fact that there are so few of us, 3.3% or 0.8%, depending on which state you are in the UK. You know, that's not a problem. That can be an advantage. But many of us, the problems that he spoke about, the child poverty, the access to social infrastructure, etc. These are things that many of us either have experienced or we have friends and family that have experienced them. But when Eric spoke about the solution. It's challenging to me, right? This idea of catalytic approach to capitalism. You know, getting that funding in order to get money into Black founders, Black businesses, so that actually we can solve some of our own solutions. If I'm ever on a plane about to leave and the phone call rings, the phone goes and you are offering me an opportunity to be part of a marshmallow and raise 1.2 billion, or one of these is a touch surgery, 400 million. I will not get on that plane. I will take the call. I will be here. So I love this idea of we are all part of a broader ecosystem. I will end, I haven't said all my notes, but I think all of us are hungry and tired. I will end by saying that the Imperial Black Alumni Network is just one of several institutions that are part of Imperial. We are just one of the organisms. There are many others that are doing great work, and Wayne's, the group that you lead in terms of Imperial as one is one example of that, but there are many others. So let's be plugged in. Let's support each other. We would like to say and think that the network plays a part, its part in being connected. But that all said, please give our speaker Eric Collins and Michelle Palmer, who's had the tough job of keeping him honest and keeping on time, and also sharing some of her experiences as well as an entrepreneur. A riveting and roaring round of applause.